welcome to today's webinar, From Chaos to Clarity, Managing Curve Data for Better Reservoir Insights. My name is Andrew Vessel, and I'll be walking you guys through some of the changes that we've made to GVERSE petrophysics and the handling of curve data in the 2026.1 release. To start off with, though, I'm just going to talk about a couple of other changes we've made to the petrophysics application with this release. First and foremost, namely around how we're doing curve data statistics. We've changed the UI for faster setup of your calculations, as well as saving the data back into ZoneManager attributes a little bit easier. Fewer clicks, simplifying that whole workflow, so you can grab multiple parameters kind of all at once as opposed to doing them one at a time. Also within the curve data statistics, the ability to utilize your core curve information. Those are the curves that we've linked back to the core data within Wellbase. Within your reservoir pay calculations, the ability to utilize in the drop-down menus, instead of just a list of the default curves, you can list well-specific curves, whatever well you have open, or curves directly from whatever UDE that you have applied. So those options are now toggleable when choosing curves in there. In the mineral track display, the ability to utilize curves from different curve sets. This is just to add that in addition to the previous feature where you're able to pull curves from different curve sets in other tracks. Now just added in the mineral track as well. The application of filters within petrophysics is now wider and kind of applied on a whole project scale within there, so that whenever you're doing all your different calculations, you don't have to constantly go and reapply the filter within each window. It can now be applied all across petrophysics as a whole, as well as improving the filter caching for better performance when you run these calculations. Makes it a bit easier to apply and utilize filters within there. But the main topic that we want to kind of talk about here is how we're handling the LAS and data being imported into your project, namely around how we're working with the already existing curves, plus now the ability to import and work with ASCII and spreadsheets of curve data and how we bring that into the project. So again, namely around curve data you're bringing into an existing curve set, where we can now kind of merge those two curves together on the curve level as opposed to just the overall curve set level. How we can convert the curve units during the import process as opposed to just kind of applying it as a blanket application within the default settings of the project. So we actually update the values of the curve data as they get imported. We can write the curve imports directly into whatever your active field data curve sets are, as opposed to having to kind of create new curve sets or writing into other existing curve sets. Whatever the field data set is for all the wells, you can just push the data directly into that. And then the ability, like I said, to import log data through ASCII files or spreadsheet data that are not directly LAS formats. Now, we previously had a way of doing this, but it was just kind of on an individual well basis. Now we can do it bulk, and the interface is a lot easier to manage and work with. So I think with that, we'll hop into the demo presentation part and walk through some of those changes that I kind of talked about there. First one I'm going to talk about is the ASCII importer and what that looks like now. So I'm here in Project Explorer, where I can go to run my imports, and it'll be here ASCII curve import. Now the interface for this will look familiar. For those of you that have been working in the more recent versions of GeoGraphix, it's pretty much the same as what you would see with the spreadsheet importer. Changes we've made to that with the 2024 release. So I'm going to go out and browse for my file. I've saved this out into an XLS file. So essentially just a spreadsheet that I've got here where my columns are, based on the well ID, depths, and then the curves that I want to bring in and what their values are at those particular depths. In this particular case, I'm just doing this one well, but you can do multiple wells all within the same sheet. That just ought to be, column of well IDs, then depths, then curve values after that, and however many number of curves you're going to be importing. Same kind of rules apply for any other spreadsheet import that you're doing. In this case, it kind of defaults to well curves. It's the only table we can import this data to. And then I can also go through and start to map out the columns of the from the spreadsheet to where I want to import that into the project. But I also have the ability to just take the column headers and automatically have that set up for me. So everything gets mapped out, units are applied here. All of these that I see here are a lot of my default curve names. Like curves I have set up in my default settings for my project. So it picked up those curve names and automatically applied them. However, in PSS, this curve is not part of my default curve list, so it didn't apply that. If I go to look at my drop-down menu, again, MPSS is not a default curve, so it doesn't appear here. Okay, the only things I see in the drop-down are my default curves. Now from here, I have two options. I can just say, okay, well, I'm just going to call this phi in as I bring it in. Can I change the name of it? Or I can just type in the curve name that I want to write this to, as well as apply the units that I want to for that particular curve. Okay, so either way to kind of handle that. Once I've got everything mapped out the way that I want, I can click the import, and then the various options that I have for how to handle that import. The important ones kind of around the ASCII curve data here is going to be what curve set am I writing this information out to. I can put it back into the field data. Like I said, that's one of the new things we've added in here. Or I can create a curve set specific for this information. It's coming from an ASCII file. Maybe I want to note that, hey, this is specifically from an ASCII or whatever data vendor it is. Whatever you want to call that curve set, I can name it here during the import process. Next thing is the step. This looks like a 1 foot step based on my depth values here. So I'll make this a 1 foot step. And then your overwrite options. So if there's already curve data in this curve set in this well, which there won't be in this case because I'm creating this curve set from scratch, but in the case where maybe I'm writing into one that already exists, how are you going to handle these curve conflicts? Keep the curve that's already in the project, replace it entirely with the one coming from this file, or just empty out that curve set entirely and replace it with the curve data that I'm bringing in now. Okay, and those are the main options that you had seen previously when importing curve data on how to handle that: preserve, replace, or replace entire set. Two new options we've added in here. I'll kind of talk more about these when we get over to the LAS import option window, kind of where those changes are occurring, but namely around how we're going to be merging at the curve level as opposed to the curve set level. From there, then, if there's any missing depth information, I can let it interpolate those depths in between for me, or kind of treat them as null, or kind of copy from the one above, and then place in there. So again, if there's any of that gap data in between, how do I want to handle that so I have a continuous depth and step all the way through, as well as what are the null values from that file that are being read. Okay, so in this case, I see a lot of negative 999.25. There's no curve data for this at this particular depth. So I need to note that this is the null value within my data. That way, this data does not get imported as an actual value. From there, then, I can also apply my unit conversions. Again, one of those other new features we've added in here, I can do that with both the ASCII imports and the LAS imports. This is going to be for places where, okay, if this, say, D row curve is coming in GM per CC, if I want to convert that to something else, I can, based on my unit conversions that I have set up in my project, convert that to whatever that is within there. I can click on this define conversion to see, again, whatever conversions I have set up in my default settings. Okay, so again, like the curves that I have in my drop-down menu, all of this is pulling from the default file, the default settings of that particular project. Okay, so if I don't see a unit conversion in here that I want to apply, I can either add it here or I can add it in my default settings for later use within there. Okay, but I'm just essentially saying, like, for instance, percent will be converted to V over V. There's your multiplier and any kind of offsets that are being applied to that calculation. Okay, I'm going to import this kind of as is. And the last option there is, like any other import that you're doing via the spreadsheet or ASCII stuff, update your well layers to make sure they're up to date with the new curve information I'm bringing in. Okay, I can import my layers at the same, or update my layers at the same time. Okay, but we'll go ahead and click Start, bring that data in. Again, just one well, so went pretty quick there. Log file will kind of tell you that, yep, in fact, one well was updated with this new curve data being brought in. Okay, I can go over to petrophysics and hop over to that well and look at its curve data. And then there it is, the ASCII curve set that I just created and the curve data that was brought in along with it. Okay, so much easier to handle ASCII and spreadsheet import of curve data than what we had previously. Like I said, ability to do it in bulk also pretty important for that. Okay, so that's our new ASCII importer. Next, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the LAS importer and some changes that have happened there, as well as just kind of review some of the ones that we've made in the previous releases. First, I'm going to go ahead and just grab the files that I want to import here. These files already exist in the project. I won't actually import them in, but I'll just go over some of the options in here. Main ones in here are going to be around kind of the curve options here in the middle. You have an option for curve mapping. This is essentially curve renaming. Okay, so this is like a lookup table where we say, okay, in the LAS file they call it, I'll kind of use that porosity example I had previously, they call it MPSS, I want to rename it to PHN, right? My alias list is already kind of doing that, but maybe I just want to outright rename the entire curve during the import process, not have to worry about its alias position or anything else like that. So I can provide a lookup table and browse out for a file. It's just a CSV or a text file where one column is the name of the curve in the file. The other column is the name of the curve that I want to change it to, right? So there's these two columns, what it is, what I want to change it to. And so during the import process, we just rename that curve so within the project it matches to what I want it to be called. Along with that also is the convert units. So that'll be applied at this step where I grab the files. And again, these are the unit conversions as they're pulled from my default settings in the project. So I'll simply check the box next to whichever units I want to have converted during the import. Percents to V over V, and then other percent readouts here, PCNT, PER, and PU. All those converted to V over V. Okay, so I can apply those in here, or just do a bulk check of everything. Just convert everything based on my conversion table. And also the ability to combine repeated curves in the same LAS file. So if an LAS file has the same curve listed multiple times, then we can kind of combine that all into a singular curve so that it runs all the way through. Maybe it's null part way through and then it picks up again at a different position in a different column for some reason. We can combine all that together during the import process. Okay. The other thing also is this well header fields. I've seen some questions kind of pop around about that a little bit. This is primarily pertaining to the well header within well base. So things like the operator name, lat long, TD, datum elevation, reference, status. If any of that information exists in the LAS file and is different than what is already in the project, then you have the option to preserve what's already in the project, overwrite what's in the project with what's in the LAS file, or just skip it altogether. I don't want to read any header records from LAS data, I just want curve information. Okay. So the main thing I want to talk about here is around how we're now handling these merges at the curve level as opposed to just the curve set level. Okay, so I'm going to run the import wizard here to get to my options. And then down here in the middle where I have the ability to import this data to an already existing curve set. For instance, maybe I'm overwriting what was brought in from that ASCII curve set, or I shouldn't necessarily overwriting, but I'm appending the curve data was from that ASCII set that I created previously. So that way, this data that I'm bringing in, now there's already curve data. How do I want to handle any potential gap or not gaps? Places where there's going to be data overlapping on top of each other. Okay, so how am I going to handle that? So again, same options we saw previously. Add the curve as a copy, preserve the existing one, replace the existing one, or replace the entire curve set. Okay, all those options that we had previously. But these new ones, merge with existing curve, either prefer the existing values or prefer the new values. So kind of as an example I'll use here is, say I'm bringing in a gamma ray curve, but there's already a gamma ray curve in this curve set, but this next gamma ray curve goes a bit deeper, right? Picks up from a different, a particular depth and continues on and goes deeper than what I already have. Okay, so when I import this, I want those two gamma rays to merge together. I don't want it to create gamma ray and gamma ray 1, or I don't want it to overwrite the already existing curve in there or anything else. I want it to just pick up where it left off and continue on with the new information that I'm bringing in. Okay, so that's going to be your prefer existing values. Whatever gamma ray data is already in there, that's good. Wherever it ends, pick up from there and use the new data that I have coming in. Prefer new values. Maybe that gamma ray curve overlaps with my existing curve for a little bit, and it's different than what's currently in there. So I want to start at the top of the new curve and replace the data that's already in there from that point, and then continue on down to the rest of the new curve values. Okay, so in those places of the overlap, use the existing or bring in the new data and overwrite that part. Again, not the entire curve, just the overlap part of that curve. Okay, so again, we're merging this data together at the curve level for this particular curve set, as opposed to taking one curve set and merging it or splicing it with another curve set that's already in the project. Okay, so kind of doing that at a curve level for whatever kind of curve set you want to bring in. Okay, so yeah, those are kind of some of the new options there for how we're going to be able to write that data into the project. And again, options there also to write that into the field data curve sets. Again, like we saw with the ASCII file, I could just write this data back into whatever the field data set is for each well, to just write directly into it. If there is no field data set for that well, you will need to give it a name. Like we're bringing in new curve data, for wells that don't have any curve data currently. Okay, well, there's no field data to write to, so what do you want to name it? You can put in the name of a curve set that you want to write that into. Again, I already have this curve data in here, so I'm not really going to run the import right now. I'm just going to click cancel out of that. But yeah, new options for how we're handling the LAS import and being able to merge that curve data together to create one continuous curve. Last little thing I want to talk about in here is just some changes we've made to the export of curve data. Just a few changes in there. I'm going to go into the export curves. The first one is the ability to kind of take some of your depth and location information and output those as curves within the LAS file if you happen to need that for wherever it might be going. So I can create curves for MD, TVD, TVD subsea, as well as my XY location. So those get written into the LAS file along with whatever other curves I'm going to be pulling in with my export, whether that be coming from a specific curve set, UDE, core data, interval data, completion data, survey data, or another new option for exporting data is directly from a template. If you remember kind of our old export tools for exporting out curve data, it also had a template option. We're just kind of pulling it over into to this export window. So whatever template that you have that you want to utilize, you can just say, okay, all the curves from this particular template, I want those to be exported. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to kind of set up. It's like, okay, I'm always going to need to export these curves for these wells. I don't have to go in here and constantly pull them down and add them manually. So I can just create a template and then pull whatever curves are in that template to be exported. Okay, so it makes that a little bit easier for pulling that data over. So a couple of other export options along with the import options that we've made within there. And that's essentially it. Kind of some of the major changes we are making there to the kind of the way we're handling curve data and curve set information, making it a bit more manageable on working with already existing curve data and how that's all going to be linked together without having to kind of go and manually merge and splice a lot of stuff together, just making it a bit more manageable and easy to work through. So thank you guys for joining today's webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. New release, I know there'll probably be a lot. We're always around to help. So again, thank you guys for your time, and hope you have a good rest of your day.